So, here goes. I look at gray, shimmering town at my feet. How far away from the townspeople I feel up on this hill. So, metaphorically get into this philosophical mood. We are far apart from the people, from the hustle and bustle of the day. It seems to me that I belong to a different species. Possible description of philosophers. So people, ordinary people, they come out of their offices after the day's work. They look at their houses and the squares with a satisfied expression. They think that this is their town, a good, solid town. They aren't afraid, most people in the street, they aren't afraid. They feel at home. They have never seen anything but the tamed water which runs out of the taps, the light which pours from the bulbs when they turn the switch. They are given proof, an important concept in philosophy of science. They are given proof 100 times a day that everything is done mechanically, that the world obeys fixed, unchangeable laws. Bodies released in a vacuum all fall at the same speed. The municipal park is closed every day at 4 p.m. in winter and at 6 p.m. in summer. Lead melts at 335 degrees. The last tram leaves the town hall at 11 p.m. It's kind of interesting, this juxtaposition of laws of nature and laws of society, physis and the nomos. We'll talk about this, because this is philosophy, natural and social science. Right? Sartre continues. The idiots, they make laws, they write populist novels, they get married, they commit the supreme folly of having children. And meanwhile, vast, vague nature has slipped into their town. It has infiltrated everywhere, into their houses, into their offices, into themselves. The nature, it doesn't move, it lies low. And they are right inside it. They breathe it and they don't see it. They imagine that nature is outside, 50 miles away, but it's here. I see it, says Sartre. I see that nature. I know that its submissiveness is laziness. Say hi to J.H. I know that nature has no laws, that what people consider nature's constancy doesn't exist. Nature has nothing but habits, and it may change those tomorrow or at any moment. What if something were to happen? By the way, disclaimer, Jean-Paul Sartre has got a Nobel Prize in Literature for this book. Anyway, so what if something were to happen? This may happen at any time, straight away, right now perhaps. The omens are there. For example, a father of a family may go for a walk, and he will see a red rag coming towards him across the street, as if the wind were blowing it. And when the rag gets closer, he will see that it's not really a rag, but a quarter of rotten meat, a piece of tortured flesh, rolling in the gutter and spasmodically shooting out jets of blood. Or else a mother may look at her child's cheek and ask him, what is this, a pimple? And she will see the flesh puff up slightly, crack and split open, and at the bottom of the split, a third eye, a laughing eye, will appear. Or else, they will feel something gently brushing against their bodies, like the caresses weeds give swimmers in a river. And they will realize that their clothes have become living things. And somebody else will feel something scratching inside their mouth. Apologies, okay? You'll have pleasant dreams tonight. Somebody else will feel something scratching inside his mouth. He will go to a mirror, open his mouth, and his tongue will have become a huge living centipede, rubbing its legs together and scraping his palate. He will try to spit it out, but the centipede will be a part of himself, and he will have to tear it out with his bare hands. And somebody who has gone to sleep in his comfortable bed, again, Nobel Prize in Literature. Somebody who has gone to sleep in his comfortable bed, in his quiet, warm bedroom, will wake up naked on a bluish patch of earth in a forest of rustling penises, rising all red and white towards the sky, like chimneys, with big testicles halfway out of the ground, hairy and bulbous, like onions. And birds will flutter around these penises and peck at them with their beaks and make them bleed. Sperm will flow gently from these wounds, sperm mingled with blood, warm and vitreous with little bubbles. Anyway, or else nothing like that will happen, but tomorrow, hundreds of suicides. Then, says Sartre, I shall burst out laughing, even if my own body is covered with filthy, suspicious-looking scabs, blossoming into fleshy flowers. I shall lean against the wall, and as they go by, I shall shout to them, what have you done with your science? What have you done with your humanism? Where is your dignity as a thinking breed? I, says Sartre, shall not be afraid, or at least no more than I am now. All those eyes which will slowly devour, which will slowly eat up a face, no doubt these eyes will be superfluous, excessive, superfluous, but no more superfluous than the first two. That's the quote. It's kind of hopefully sets us into an appropriate mood. I think there's a certain important lesson in humility to be drawn from a quote like this, especially, we're going to be talking about all these wonderful advances of contemporary science, and here's somebody like Jean-Paul Sartre questioning, what is the foundation? What is, if you want, the methodological and the philosophical foundation of all this? And although this course technically has no prerequisites, so we'll discuss this, but many of you, I hope, have had philosophy in previous years, so you know David Hume's challenge, the challenge of criticism of induction. So what Sartre is actually driving at is a deep philosophical puzzle. We'll discuss this. The puzzle basically is that science seems to be extremely robust, and it seems that nature allows us to get away with this complacency, with trusting that science will work. I mean, I walk on this floor, completely oblivious to the fact that it may collapse at any moment. How do I know that the floor will continue to support me from moment to moment? David Hume and Jean-Paul Sartre will tell me, I don't know that. There is no guarantee. However, I have this very irresponsible faith, and somehow the floor will continue to support me. And somehow the universe allows me to get away with that. Okay, so that's, and I mean in general, Sartre's quote is what's right? Like if I were to try to summarize what Sartre is trying to say, and as American philosopher John Searle, I refer to Searle from time to time, and as he says, nature is radically contingent, or at least we have no way of knowing that it's not radically contingent. Contingent in the sense that there are no fixed laws. Yes, we observe certain patterns, and these patterns repeat from moment to moment to moment, but what is the deep reason for why these patterns, let's say, have to hold? Do we have this reason? Do we have this proof? Do we have this justification? Hume says no, Sartre says no, Searle says no. Again, this idea that nature is radically contingent. And this is going to be kind of an interesting puzzle in this course, because on the one hand, there will always be this lingering skepticism about everything I say, but at the same time, we're going to try to construct this ambitious picture, this huge monumental structure, which if you examine very closely, kind of doesn't really rest on anything, doesn't really have any firm foundation, but has something like a swamp beneath its feet. Okay, so let me try to go back to a maybe more standard lecture format. Let me go back to my outline. So first of all, the course is philosophy and methodology of the natural and the social sciences. This is wonderful. I like many courses. Anyway, so natural sciences and social sciences. My handwriting is not excellent, but hopefully it won't be too much of a problem. So, and I've already posted the outline, and in fact, I recorded a short 10-minute video briefly going through all the topics. Probably I will repeat everything I say, everything I said in the video, I'll probably repeat today, but with my style of thinking, it's not a guarantee, so I always prefer to have backup. So the backup is already there in the Teams or information system, whatever. So, so we're going to spend approximately 7 lectures on the natural sciences and approximately 7 lectures on the social sciences. It's not exactly true, because when we talk about natural sciences, we will discuss how can we think of social theory as a natural science. So there will be slightly, slightly more leaning towards the social sciences. However, that's fine, because you're either economists or data science. You deal with human beings. Your specialization is humans, right? Anyway, so this course has again no prerequisites. So I will try to make everything explicit. Like I will try to not assume any prior knowledge on your part. So let me explain very briefly. So philosophy of science. Most people, if they know anything about the subject, they have a certain expectation that what we're going to talk about is we're going to start with logical positivists, we're going to talk about Karl Popper, falsifications, maybe Thomas Kuhn, structural revolution, scientific revolution. That's a possible way of approaching philosophy of science. That's exactly not, more or less not the way we're going to be proceeding. The reasons are many and varied. Yeah, so this classical subject, is philosophy of science. I mean, it's interesting, it has its uses, but first of all, most students find it too abstract and maybe slightly boring. And secondly, this was the canon maybe about 50 years ago. Right now, philosophy of science is trying to move, branch out. And philosophy of science is trying to take, contemporary philosophy, in 2020, philosophy of science is trying to take problems in the science, philosophical problems in the sciences much more seriously. So basically, we will talk about classical epistemological problems. Again, people like Karl Popper, Thomas Kuhn, Paul Feyerabend, maybe some of you have heard these names before. But this is going to be limited. Basically, what is my philosophy of this course? I think that philosophy of science is humanity's attempt to ask the biggest, the most fundamental questions, and then to try to come up with the best answers to these questions. Sounds very ambitious. I mean, we only have something like 14, maybe 15 lectures. So obviously, I'm not promising, a predictive answer to every question, but what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to build a certain scaffolding. We're going to try to build a certain structure, certain, like the root of the tree, and you can then fill in the details. And hopefully, by the end of this course, you will have basic preliminary answers to life's most important questions. Yeah, let's be ambitious. But more importantly, you will have a feel on how to proceed tackling these questions on your own, outside of classroom, which is, most important. Education is self-education, as you know. Anyway, so yeah. Now, so we're gonna go broader and deeper. And most professional philosophers will find my approach distasteful because they would say, oh, this is too much, too superficial maybe. But I don't care, because I think this course has to be interesting and engaging for you and for me. You're a free person. You're free people. I'm a free person. We're here because we want to be here. Okay? So I think that at the end of the day, this course has to do something for us. So I want to dare to ask the big questions and to try to answer them also. So a technical way to get into a discipline like this, and very often classes in philosophy. Krista gave his introduction yesterday to history, Western philosophy. He also began with this. It's boring, but whatever. The standard way to approach any philosophical subject is to start with Immanuel Kant. Now, I'm not exactly a fan of Kant, but he has his place, important place. And Kant says that there are three most important questions in life, like in general, and also in philosophy. These questions are: what can I know? What can I hope for? What should I do? So what can I know? Like, I look at you, are you really here, or is this maybe a hallucination of my sick brain? What can I hope for? What does the future hold? What can I expect from the future? Third question, what should I do? And a very important question, I'll talk about this in a second. Most people don't have the luxury of pausing and asking themselves this question. But students, especially students of prestigious universities, usually do have that luxury. To take a moment, to take a break, and to ask themselves, what the hell am I doing with my life? And what should I be doing? And Kant says that these three questions are actually reducible to a fourth, more fundamental question. And this fourth question is, what is a human being? So what can I know? What should I do? What can I hope for? Reducible to question number 4, more fundamental question, what is a human being? What am I? What am I? And yeah, in some sense, I think this is a good summary of my basic approach in the course. This is the most important question that we're going to try to deal with. We're going to try to tackle. So, what is a human being? And incidentally, I'll return to this in a second. But you could say, I'm thinking of a way to maybe open whatever. It doesn't matter. Broken down the hands, right? No. Okay, I better not touch my buttons. Anyway, so you could say, why should you talk about human beings? So actually, another way of phrasing this, again, John Searle, one of the more prominent philosophers who's still alive today from the University of California, Berkeley, an American philosopher. He says that the overriding intellectual task of humanity today, not just of philosophy, but of humanity, is to reconcile our picture of reality, is to build a unified picture of reality, as he says, from protons to presidents, and from electrons to elections. Anyway, so to ask ourselves, how does our picture of reality hold together? How can we reconcile our picture of basic fundamental forces of nature, basically at the level of quantum physics, to be more precise, at the level of quantum field theory, right? When we talk about the fluctuations in the quantum fields, maybe particles or packets of mass energy, which are meaningless, mindless, unconscious, unconscious, meaningless particles at the basic level. How do we reconcile that picture with our understanding of ourselves as mindful, meaningful, conscious, rational, free agents? How does this world hold together, again, from protons to presidents and from electrons to elections? And immediately you could say, okay, why from protons to presidents and not, let's say, from protons to supernova or from protons to supermassive black holes? Why should we, use scale? And there's an interesting way of answering this question. I'm going to refer to Sean Carroll. I will be referring to Sean Carroll a lot. Probably should write his name on the board. He's going to be the patron saint of this course, Sean Carroll. So Sean Carroll is actually is a cosmologist. So he's a theoretical physicist at Caltech, California University of Technology. Caltech, how do you say it? Doesn't matter. Anyway, and in Caltech, Sean Carroll actually sits at the desk of Richard Feynman, if you know who Feynman is. Anyway, and Carroll specializes in physics, again, in specifically cosmology, questions of cosmology, theoretical cosmology, but he's a very prominent science communicator. And actually, for my money, I think that Sean Carroll is one of the foremost intellectuals of our day, and he's really knowledgeable, not just about physics, but about philosophy. And very surprisingly, very rarely, things, which is very rare, something I find very rarely, things that he says about politics or ethics or human consciousness, I find them to be deeply congenial. So he knows his stuff, not just in physics, but also outside of his field. Anyway, so what Carroll says is that if you look at the history of the universe, the most important fact, so this is time, the most important fact, and in fact something that gives us the arrow of time, according to our best physical description, is entropy. So entropy increases. Probably it increases exponentially, but I don't want to draw that, so let me just oversimplify it like this. So this is going to be the increase in entropy. So entropy starts very low at the Big Bang, and then at the end of the day, this bleak and very...
What is entropy?
Entropy. Thank you. This is exactly what you should do, okay? So if I do this, if I use your argument, you don't know, so really interrupt me. So entropy is a measure of disorderliness of the system. So at the very beginning, at the Big Bang, well, we'll talk about the Big Bang. Big Bang is actually an interesting question in itself. What the hell are we talking about when we talk about the Big Bang? But at the Big Bang, we have all the matter, all the energy in the universe compressed into a very small region. Not at time equals 0, because that's unknown. Okay, our theories break down at time equals 0. But at maybe a couple of femtoseconds after time 0, everything is very compressed. So there's a lot of, if you want, free energy to do useful work. It's like the gasoline which hasn't been burnt, right? And then the disorderliness increases. All of the energy in the universe dissipates, and this moves to this hypothetical point. And actually, there's a steady point. There's a maximum amount of entropy as far as our physical theories tell us. So it's going to stay the same forever, which is a very, very bleak and very unsatisfactory picture. And this is known as the heat death of the universe. Heat death of the universe. There are other scenarios, but this one sort of gets most traction these days. In one fell swoop, that's the history of everything, as far as we can tell, from the standpoint of our contemporary physics. Now, again, philosophers among you will immediately say, Alex, don't rush ahead. Please be careful. Even if we trust our best theories, we do not know what happens at time equals 0. Our theories break down at that point. We certainly do not know how to ask the question if anything came came before that? Well, I shouldn't say we don't know how to answer the question. In fact, we do have some theories that imagine something before that. For example, Richard Penrose's conformal concentric cosmology? Something like that. CCC model. You can look this up if you want. And also, if you go into the future, not sort of in the foreseeable time, but if you imagine some kind of Googleplex number of years, or maybe Graham's number of years, you know these words, then possibly our theories also break down. So who knows? So there's a domain of applicability to our theories, which is this. This is going to be 13.7, so approximately 14 billion years ago. And this is, well, actually, remind me to double check this. Somebody should double check this. When is the heat death of the universe coming? I don't remember, but let's just, for fun, let's write 10 to the 100. That's probably an underestimate, probably more than that. Anyway, yeah, so, sorry. I have a tendency of getting sidetracked. The most important bit of the puzzle is actually not on the board. So I was asking, why care about human beings? Why do you care? I mean, if you're a physicist, why should you care about human beings? From the standpoint of entropy, we're just a small blip somewhere here. What is special about here? Well, actually, it turns out, from the standpoint of contemporary physics, there is something special. This room is very special from the standpoint of physics. In addition to entropy, you also have complexity. Okay, I'm going to use red. And complexity goes like this. So this is going to be complexity. So the universe at the very beginning is very low entropy, but it's also not complex at all. It is very easy to write just a simple formula for the early universe, and that just tells you basically everything you need to know. I mean, we can predict with extreme degree of accuracy the chemical composition of the early universe. So like the most abundant element is hydrogen, then helium, then lithium, and we know the ratios. And we can do this. So it's entropy is low, but complexity is also low. Nothing interesting is happening. As far as we can tell, life or anything like that is impossible. 14 billion years ago. So 14. Well, it's not. I mean, it's just Big Bang. Okay, let me erase this. Okay, Big Bang. Big Bang. Okay. Anyway, so and when the heat death of the universe occurs, everything just turns into a quantum foam, and you have this, particle-antiparticle pairs just annihilating in empty space, or something like that, right? So nothing interesting here, nothing interesting here. So complexity is close to zero here and here. Complexity is actually hard to define. There's something called Kolmogorov complexities. Data science people maybe know.
How do we measure complexity?
Huh? How do you measure complexity? Yeah. This is a deep puzzle. Actually, the best way to, I will not give you an answer, but if you want, Sean Carroll has just finished recording a wonderful course of lectures. It has 24 lectures called Biggest Ideas of the Universe. He mostly talks about physics. And he has a lecture, I think it's on complexity and criticality. Now, this is a very good question. The answer is we do not know. This is what's right phrase. This is an unsolved problem in science right now. It's a little bit like P versus NP problem, if you know, from computation, right? So one way to try to do this is, again, to use Kolmogorov complexity, which is define complexity algorithmically. But it doesn't work very well for reasons I don't want to go into right now. Look at Sean Carroll's talk. Sean Carroll says, I think he still uses Kolmogorov complexity, but he introduces coarse graining. If you coarse grain Kolmogorov complexity, doesn't work. Okay, everybody else is grain explodes, right? Henry, what the hell are you talking about? Don't worry, let's talk about this some other time. Sorry. So yeah, but thank you very much. Complexity is not a very well-defined term, unfortunately. So this picture is tentative and provisional. And it's not like we know this 100%, but it's a good picture. And again, the credit for this picture goes to Sean Carroll. And the idea is that we are somewhere along, we are somewhere over here approximately. And basically, so in terms of this complexity, you can think of some kind of a ladder of being. So at the very beginning in the universe, there's only physics. This kind of sounds strange, but yeah, I mean, for example, chemistry cannot happen because it's just too hot for stable molecules. So then, as the universe cools down, so I'm moving up in this direction, right? as the universe cools down, you get the first cores of atoms forming. Then you get the first atoms themselves, and then you have this epoch of reionization, right? And then you can get stable molecules. So you have the emergence of chemistry. Chemistry is just applied electromagnetism in the world with the Pauli exclusion principle. Anyway, so then above chemistry, and so again, at some point, so like physics, you start here, and then chemistry maybe emerges at this level of complexity. Then you can talk about not just chemistry, but let's say organic chemistry, which needs, for long-chain, molecules to form, you need very special conditions. So the universe has to cool down. Also, the universe has to clump. You need to get things such as stars. You need to get, planets. Actually, you cannot really get carbon before the explosions, before the supernova explosions. Okay, I get sidetracked. It's a wonderful story. If we had 50 classes, we talk about this in detail, but whatever. You can look up Schonkel describes in glorious detail. So then, after organic chemistry, you get biology. And again, like this is the basic scaffolding. I'm not saying that humanity has all of this figured out. It's not true. I mean, we have figured out a certain domain of physics within a certain range, but even this transition from physics to chemistry is kind of problematic. Anyway, so and then on top of biology, maybe one of these days I'll change my mind. But so far I draw these forms of the devil, and what I write here, I write psychology and something like social science, maybe group dynamics if you want. So you could ask this question: what comes first? Is it psychology or is it sociality? Did the first organ? I mean, when I say psychology, I mean the first organisms that evolved a dedicated nervous system, right? So what evolved first? Was it the dedicated nervous system, or was it sociality, some kind of herd? Well, the answer is I'm not sure, and it's not important, because what happens afterwards is there's co-evolution. These things evolve together. So right now, in your bodies, if we believe biologists, there are genes that have been shaped by the fact that humans are social. So through social, not just biological natural selection, but social natural selection, group selection form. And likewise, the groups can only exist because we have certain mechanisms within us. As Yale biologist Stephen Stearns puts it, biology provides biological handles for culture to pull on. So, give a very simple example. We'll talk about this. This is really important. I mean, we're all well behaved, extremely well behaved. And I mean, you exit your house this morning. Most people behave in extremely predictable patterns. Nobody, danced naked in the street. Nobody slapped you in the face. I would imagine, wild cats, right? In the streets of Moscow. And the question is, how does this happen? One possible answer, it's not the full story, but one possible answer is that there's discipline and there's punishment. So if somebody misbehaves, they are punished through various means. But if you think about this for 5 seconds, the only reason that you can punish somebody is because they have a certain biological makeup or physical makeup. So for example, if you flog me, I feel pain and I perceive pain as something bad, right? So this is how group dynamics can use the handles of my biology to shape my behavior. So if you want, society acts upon me through the mediation of my body. Like to take a stupid example. For example, if you try to punish me, not by beating me up, but let's say by bombarding me with neutrinos, it wouldn't work. Because my body is immune to neutrinos. I don't feel them. So it's kind of convoluted example, but the idea is that the most important takeaway point is that our psychology shapes our group dynamic, and our group dynamic shapes our psychology. And again, when I say this, including genes. Anyway, so where was I? I was talking about increased complexity. So we increase complexity. What is the highest level of complexity? Well, this is a fun topic to just speculate. So right now, depending on how you define a single object, the most complex object in the universe known to science is a human brain. Well, tentative, but whatever. Immediately you could say, well, but a society of people would be more complex than a brain because it includes the brain. Yeah, so yeah, I would have to agree then. Yeah. And by this measure, get this, sociology is objectively far more complex than physics. And again, Sean Carroll, the physicist, will say this over and over and over again. Physicists are proceeds. They study the simplest stuff in the universe, the stuff that's easiest to explain. Yes, we have made a lot of progress, but physicists were helped by the fact that physical interactions are very, comparatively speaking, are very simple. When you go up this chain, every next level increases complexity exponentially. So, even somewhere maybe along, on this level, predicting weather is extremely difficult. We cannot predict weather reliably. How do you expect sociologists or economists to predict social behavior? And again, this partly has to do with the nature of chaos and chaos theory, but that's neither here nor there. So what I'm driving at is that, well, like if I were to put on my imaginative hat, I would say that probably at the pinnacle, the most complex thing imaginable would be something like the, the intergalactic federation of multiple alien species working together, something like that. But since we haven't made contact with the intergalactic federation yet, I'm going to have to write international relations. International relations is the most, by this measure, objectively the most complex science in existence. Which my international relations students will have to hear that. But but don't worry. Economics is supposed to be tight. Well, actually, no. Especially international economics. Apologies. International economics has to be on the same level. But as far as I can tell, and I'm in fact I'm a political philosopher by trade, as some of you know. From a similar political philosophy, international relations, international economics. Anyway, so yeah. And in some sense, especially in this first 7 lectures of the course, I want to take us down this road. Again, the science is not figured out completely, so we do not yet have the full story. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to be giving you the full story. So it's like the science is incomplete, and I'm going to be giving you an incomplete account of an incomplete account. So this is difficult to be kept in mind. But still, I think as a certain roadmap to help you orient in the world, we're going to, hopefully we'll be able to do a pretty good job. Again, judging by how the past years went, it's doable. Anyway, yeah. So let me. Actually, as a matter of fact, I have no idea how much time do we have left.
Until 40.
About 45 minutes.
We have 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. Anyway, I can talk for 45 minutes. So in some sense, this is not exactly the preview of how the classes are going to go, but this is the conceptual preview of the kind of picture that we want to achieve by the end of the first 7 classes. Okay, so let me talk about the second part of the course, which is philosophy of the social sciences. So I don't know. Let me start somewhere. Well, it's like in general, I said that thinking back to Kant, what can I know? What should I do? What can I hope for? What is a human being? And there's a certain deeply practical character to this kind of way of phrasing the task of philosophy. And so I say this up front, and I mean this very seriously. So for me, personally, right, my understanding of philosophy is a deeply practical discipline. Now, of course, practical by philosophical standards, that's a complicated term, but still. And in general, if you think back in the history of philosophy, this is not some kind of idiosyncratic position on my part. The ancient Greeks have used to think of philosophy in a certain particular way, this practical way. The Greeks used to say that philosophy should be for the soul what medicine is to the body. So philosophy should be for the soul what medicine is for the body. Of course, it's interesting how you define the word soul, but that's, again, not important for our present purposes. And again, I find this practical outlook deeply congenial. I share this practical outlook I think that, again, at the end of the day, the question of what am I? What should I do? What is the, the meaning of human life? These are, in a deep sense, the most important questions. And I'm not sure if this is the best time to talk about this. Let me start. I think that the way any philosophy begins, sort of even before you walk into a classroom or pick up a science book, let's sort of restart our discussion. Let's just, metaphorically speaking, not really, but like close your eyes and think, what am I doing here? Should remind you of Descartes' meditation, maybe a little bit. And it's an important philosopher, Martin Heidegger, and he's the founder of the, well, not the founder, but the co-founder of a very important tradition, the phenomenological tradition. The word phenomenology is actually going to be important in a second. Phenomenology. So phenomenology from Greek word phine, meaning to show. So phenomenology is a discipline that tries to study human experience in the way that the experience presents itself to us. So it's like I close my eyes and I try to describe my experience as accurately as I can. And Heidegger has a contention, a very controversial contention, but a contention that I share. That if you pause and think very carefully, like if I ask myself, what am I doing right now in this room? Why am I standing here? Heidegger says that if I think about this carefully, I will find a certain very troubling, puzzling, disconcerting fact. I don't want to say fact, but observation. So maybe to put it up front, sort of Heidegger says we are, time is very important for Heidegger, we are stretched between two problematic moments in time. There's a point of departure where we came from. And Heidegger says, if I think about this carefully enough, I do not know where I came from. And then there's the point of destination, where am I going? And again, if you think carefully enough, you don't know, or at least we do not know for sure where we are going. And like again, to flesh this out a little bit more, like if I try to describe to myself without making any assumptions, what happens to me? I could say that I have a memory of having emerged from the unconsciousness of deep sleep, earlier this morning. And I already found myself, already finding myself, thrown into this world. Indeed, with certain beliefs, desires, dispositions, which I do not choose. I find myself with these dispositions. But the point of origin is unclear to me. Or again, to put this differently, if you don't like this metaphor with waking up in the morning, Brian McGee, some of you remember Brian McGee from last year. Brian McGee summarized it in the following way. He says, human beings, what is our condition? We always already find ourselves having emerged from the unconsciousness of early babyhood, finding ourselves again thrown into this world without a manual, very importantly. So we find ourselves with a certain body, with certain dispositions, maybe beliefs, desires, but without a manual, without an instruction manual. And of course, people will tell you that there is a manual, that there's maybe this book or this person who has it all figured out. But there's a big problem with all of these manuals, because these manuals come, so to speak, without a factory stamp, without a factory warranty. People will try to sell you their view of what the meaning of life is. But again, any view is always, in a certain sense, problematic, potentially open to revision, uncertain, fallible, could be liable to error. I mean, so if you believe a certain book which tells you what the meaning of life is, how do you know that the book is right and is not lying to you or is convincing you in a rhetorical fashion? So anyway, so there is, Heidegger says, there is the this vague unconsciousness of early babyhood. So unconsciousness of babyhood. And the second point in the future is the anxiety in the face of death. So anyway, I should probably write this is, but yeah, birth and death. Both of these moments in time, again, are problematic to us. They are vague. They are unclear. We do not have, any of us, we do not have a clear recollection of being born, or how exactly did it come about that we were born. You could say, well, you can tell a certain story about your parents, but how is it, like in the grand scheme of things, that it was you who was born to your parents and not, let's say, somebody else? And what exactly is your mission like? And likewise, death, an equally problematic point, because again, technically speaking, if you're dead, you cannot experience anything. So death, in a certain important sense, cannot really be a fact of your experience. And we are strong between these 2 points. And on the one hand, I do not mean to just depress you. It's early in the morning, right? But of course, Heidegger's philosophy is deeply disconcerting and depressive. But I want to say that there's an important productive element in this uneasiness. Because Heidegger would say that most people are not philosophers. Well, let's not be judgmental. Most people are not philosophers probably because they cannot afford to be philosophers. Because it takes time and effort. Well, it takes luck. And often it takes good teachers to get interested in philosophy. Most people simply do not have the time to engage in that. Do not have the time to pause, to stop and ask yourself, what are you thinking? Again, let me write this word, suspension, on the board. I would say that the fundamental philosophical experience is the experience of suspension, of just pausing, stopping in your tracks, and asking yourself, what am I doing? I mean, we're extremely busy. We always rush everywhere all the time. I mean, for example, I rushed here today, right? Especially trying to prepare all this wonderful technology, but whatever, right? But if we pause and if we really ask ourselves, what the hell are we doing? It's a problematic question to answer. And again, let me be honest with you. Like, you are listening to this, some people therefore lecture. But why am I here? And why am I doing this? And Heidegger's contention is that if I'm honest with myself, and if I think about this clearly enough, my answer has to be, I do not know. I do not have the slightest idea. I can try to tell you a story. I could say, for example, well, I'm a professional philosopher, so giving lectures is part of my career. And you could say, okay, but why do you care about your profession? Why do you care about your career? And I could say something about, like, it puts bread on my table, or maybe it gives me social esteem, something like that. But you could be like the nagging child and keep asking the questions and say, okay, but why do you care about social esteem? Why do you care about putting bread on the table? This has something to do with my genes, maybe, that I need bread, and also, as a matter of genes, I need socialist biology. But still, you could say, but why? Why do you care about those things? And even if I can give this evolutionary account, it does not really answer the question as to sort of why do I have to go along with that? Why do I have to agree with that? And again, I already gave this conclusion, but let me say this again. Heidegger would say that the fundamental experience, if you get into this philosophical mood, is you do not have the slightest idea. Things happen to you. Heidegger has this poetic way of saying this. He says you can recognize, you can contemplate being existing through you. That you are a medium. He doesn't mean it in a religious fashion, something like that. But there's something large and mysterious happening, and you are a part of that. You are a plaything of larger forces which you do not really understand. And as a matter of fact, I mean this quite seriously, because as a professional philosopher, I have to think about these things over and over again, especially in September. These are difficult and disconcerting questions. My body has certain habits, so much so I have given this lecture many times before. To a very large extent, you are listening to my voice. I am listening to my voice. So there's a big difference between a feeling of a conscious act and just this, okay, well, rehearsed lecture, let's talk about this. These exact words I have spoken so many times before. So, but isn't this kind of bizarre? Like, I see my body operating in some sense independently of me, and what is the meaning behind this? Why should I care about this? And Heidegger does not give answers, and I will not give you answers in this course. But I want to say that to do philosophy is to ask these questions. At the end of the day, it doesn't seem that we really come to any final answers. Maybe we only end up with more interesting questions. But still, it is the act of asking questions which is fundamental and important. Asking questions and keeping asking them over and over and over again, and not being satisfied with subpar answers. And it's something I need to talk about. This is a very hot topic, controversial topic, and people tend to get upset. But I think I have to talk about this at least a little bit. Oftentimes, I find not always, but oftentimes I find students have this very misleading impression that science and philosophy, they are so uncertain. There's no truth, human mind is limited, whatever. But religion has the answers. Science is uncertain, religion has the answer. And very often, when we talk about a particular problem, people will offer religious accounts as alternative solutions, which are alternatives to science. Now, when I say religion, of course, who knows? Many different people mean different things. I am talking about, so Heidegger would stress asking questions. In this sense, religion, the way I define it, would stress having an answer. And not just having an answer, but an answer which is revealed to you. So some kind of shortcut to the truth. That somehow, okay, human mind is limited. We do not know what's going to happen in the next second. False vacuum of the Higgs field will rip this room apart in the next moment. That's a theoretical possibility, which is not ruled out by contemporary physics. It could happen in the next moment, right? But you could say human mind is limited, but God or gods, so there are benefits of teaching world intellectual history. Because, most people assume that there's either a God or no God, but not true. There are many options. You can have a committee of gods. You can have different layers. Maybe you can have gods who fight against one another. My favorite religious account, in that sense, is the universe of, nobody will get this reference, Saints Row. Have you heard of this? Yeah. So God in that universe rewards you for running over innocent pedestrians, and if you kill enough innocent bystanders, you get infinite health, and much more importantly, infinite bullets, infinite ammo. So when students come to me and ask, Alexander, do you believe in God? I'm not tempted to say which God do you mean, what kind of God? There are competing conceptions of divinity, and first-year students, who are not first-year students, but first-year students, very often lack imagination, to think how many different options there are. And this is actually exactly the point I'm driving towards. Because, you could say humans make mistakes, but the divinity, God or gods, have the right answers. Well, if the divinity has the right answers, how is it that we have so many religions? And not just so many religions, but every religion has, hundreds, sometimes thousands of denominations. My students will remember from last year. Christianity has how many denominations? So, Russian Orthodox, Lutherans, Anglicans, how many? Remember? Yeah. So it's so it's 4 O O O 40,000. There are 40,000 denominations of Christianity. Now, as far as I can tell, many, if not most, believe that their interpretation of Christianity is right, and everybody else is going to hell. So it's not just that every religion is in the minority, right? So Christianity is by far the largest religion, but in general it's in the minority. But even Christianity is not one thing. Most Christians are in the minority, even with respect to the religion. And so you could say, yeah, but how is it possible? If it's possible to get revelation straight from God, how is it possible for human beings to disagree? People read the Bible. Well, first of all, there are many religious texts, and then every religious text usually has variants. There are many different versions of the Bible, and different Bibles will include different books. There's like the Mormons in America have 3 books in the Bible, like 3 volumes in the Bible, and each volume has additional books in it. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that human beings compile text. By the way, there's also a problem of translation, problem of the originals, because the originals are lost. Not to mention that for most religious traditions, you don't really have the original. You have the words of people, words like words of Jesus or words of Muhammad that are then written down. How do you know that people who wrote them down were faithful and did not make mistakes? This is problems upon problems. So what I'm trying to say at the end, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be controversial. Okay, I'm not trying to insult religious faith. This goes against the spirit of the course. The spirit of the course is asking questions and being open being open-minded. So it could be that the religious account, this or that particular religious account, is correct. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a distinct logical possibility. But the problem is, what I'm trying to drive at, is that there's a certain important fundamental primacy of philosophy and of science vis-a-vis religion. Because religions disagree, you have to make a choice. You have to make a conscious choice. And this choice has to be based on something. It has to be based on argument. It has to be based on reason. So philosophy can provide grounds for religion. Science can provide grounds for religion. But religion cannot substitute for science. It's a one-way street. So again, people say science is uncertain, but religion is certain. No, it's the other way around. How do you know that your reading of that particular book is correct unless you have done the science? So religion depends on independent scientific or philosophical justification. And without it, it's just prejudice. And again, people will immediately come back at me and say, Alex, no. Religion is about faith. It's about this heroic leap of faith in the dark. I believe not because I have arguments, but I believe precisely because I have no arguments. And, this is, people try to paint this as some kind of great, heroic, poetic picture. I mean, Immanuel Kant, for example, talks about this, or Søren Kierkegaard. And I want to say, there's something deeply dissatisfactory about this, I think, because for the vast majority of people on planet Earth, believing a certain faith is not a question of their own individual deed, something like leap of faith, individual leap of faith. No, most people are religious for the blandest, most pedestrian reasons. They are religious because of their social environment, usually because of their parents. And that's not a very satisfying reason. It's like, well, at some point I'm bound to say this phrase, if you do not think for yourself, others think for you. And some people may find this all right, but most students I talk to don't. And you can't, theoretically it's possible that your grandmother, not to insult your grandmother, it's possible that your grandmother has truth from God, it's possible. But how do you know, unless you've done some kind of preliminary examination, unless you have proof? So you could just have been lucky, right? And your grandmother does have the answers, but that's not satisfying. And again, because there are so many religions and they disagree, chances are, statistically, that your grandma is wrong. If your grandma is religious, assume. Anyway, so yeah, I maybe slightly too much time on this, but I just wanted to get some. When we talk about epistemology, theory of knowledge, either remind me to talk about religion or just think about this yourself. So it's like in science, there's this interesting and problematic give and take between observation and theory, right? So you have a theory, and then you have observations, and sort of you move between the two. Your theory predicts certain experiments, and then your observations. No, sorry. So experiments go on this side. So you make certain experiments. And this is how you test your theory versus observations. And then on this side, you have what philosophers would say called operationalization. So you try to think of how you convert theory into testable predictions. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that this model applies completely to religion. Because if I have a religious belief, I have a certain religious theory, let's say that, God forbids eating pork, who knows? Then I have operationalization, and I have to look at the text to find the confirmation of my word, confirmation or disconfirmation. And as I go through the circle, I have to ask myself, what is the text? Why do I trust this text? Why do I trust this edition of the text? Why do I trust this translation of the text? Because again, most world religions were created a long time ago, and technically speaking, the languages have changed, the languages have moved on. Who knows? Maybe the words don't mean the same thing they used to. So this whole problematic cyclical. By the way, this is a circle, and in some sense, a vicious circle. Like your theories corroborate by observations, but observations, only make sense in light of theory. We'll talk about this more. Don't worry. So this vicious circle applies to science. It's a problematic, unsolved puzzle at the root of science, but also at the root of religious belief as well. Anyway, so actually, let's talk about science. That's kind of the next point. I should. So tell me again, when we...
20 minutes.
20 minutes. In principle, I think I should be pausing and asking if you have any questions. Let me just finish with what I have on the outline of the talk. So, yeah. So when we talk about science, some philosophers have tried to define science, to say exactly what science is. Now, so it's a long lecture, so I don't want necessarily to go into all the technical details. We'll have a chance to examine this. But in general, the tentative conclusion, and especially the textbooks that we're going to be reading, and Sean here will corroborate this conclusion, that really, if you're looking for a strict criteria to separate science from non-science, or if you're looking for a firm foundation for scientific knowledge, neither of these things can be obtained. So the consensus in the philosophy and methodology community is that science itself is a product of consensus. So you do not have, so there's no strict rules, So we do not have that. What we have instead is a social consensus. There's one prominent philosopher of science, Richard Rorty, puts it that the status of science, the name of science, is like a badge of honor. It's like an award that human societies give to certain kinds of enterprises that have passed our, the best verification procedures that we were able to come up with. This is going to be a problem because, at the end of the day, it seems that you cannot really justify this consensus, logically or metaphysically. That at the end of the day, sort of what separates science from non-science, truth from falsehood, it seems that the only way we can do this as humanity is by consensus. And this is deeply disconcerting because, at the end of the day, it seems that the procedure is more like in a court of law. In a court of law, that scientists convince us, like they convince the jury, to go with one verdict or another verdict. But we would want to have a deeper, more secure foundation for our knowledge, but we don't seem to have it. So, and this is again controversial, but this is going to be the basic outlook that we're going to have in this course. That science is this deeply human enterprise, and doing science is a little bit like playing a game. And the same way, football is man-made, but the rules are not arbitrary. You cannot just change them on a whim. Likewise, science is man-made, and there are certain rules which emerge and evolve. But at the end of the day, just like football, science only relies on human consensus. It seems. We would like to, appeal to some higher authority, but that seems to elude us so far. And on this view, notice, sort of on my definition of science, and on this view of science, there is no interesting difference between science, philosophy, and religion. And again, I talked about religion a second ago. Many philosophers would find this distasteful, and they would say, oh, no. Science is here, religion is here. That's not my approach, okay? My approach is we have the questions are important. We have to try to come up with the best answers. Whatever is the consensus is the best answer, we call that science. In religion, one big problem is that not only is there no consensus, it's not exactly clear how you could arrive at a consensus. Imagine, I don't know, a Buddhist and a Hindu, a Buddhist and a Christian sitting in a room. How do they decide? What is the procedure? How do they decide which religion is correct? It's not like science has knocked down procedures. There's always problems, there's always caveats. But it seems that scientists are much better at deciding which theory is right. Anyway, let's continue. So, should be wrapping this up, maybe. Let me talk about a couple more things. So I have, so to speak, 3 rules of method. It's kind of my methodological, task to myself. So my 3 rules. I'm not exactly sure why I'm saying this. It's not like I want you to memorize it. It's not like I even want you to agree with it. Okay? I'm just telling you where I come from. My 3 rules of philosophical method are going to be, I think it's skepticism. I tried to invent some names for them. I think it's skepticism, fallibilism, and empiricism. Whatever. I think that's it. So, yeah, probably in the floor. Okay, so for reasons which are in my own bloody head, don't worry about some less of fallibilism. And again, so this is, you don't have to agree with this, but this is full disclosure where I come from. First, fallibilism. Fallibilism is the idea, the notion, the philosophical notion that about your beliefs, you have the belief that they may be wrong. Okay? So I hold a lot of beliefs. Some of them I hold passionately, but about all of my beliefs, I am open to revision. I am open to the prospect of them being proven wrong. It's just one open-mindedness. Again, we have this ancient, enterprise which goes back to ancient philosophy of trying to give certain foundations for knowledge, but it seems to fail over and over and over again. This problem of criteria, problem of induction, problem of deduction. At the end of the day, it seems that no statement, not even that 2 + 2 = 4, is beyond doubt. Right? So we have to keep an open mind and have to keep open the possibility that our views may turn out to be wrong. Second, skepticism. Now, when I say skepticism, I use this maybe in a slightly idiosyncratic fashion. The Greek word skeptikos means inquirer, somebody who asks questions, somebody who keeps asking questions. So, for me, what this is about trying to bring to mind the assumptions that we have, and trying to examine and to question our assumptions. This is very difficult to do because we assume all the time, and we assume a million things. In fact, called the background problem in philosophy of language, it is impossible to list all the assumptions. And as soon as you've listed all the assumptions, you have to, it's like impossible to do. This is to some extent related to Gödel's and completeness theorem in ways not really important. But so you cannot do this completely. You cannot be a complete skeptic. You can try. You can try to question what every sane person takes for granted. Like, why is the sky blue? Or why are people so well behaved in the street? And the last one is empiricism. So, rationalist philosophers would disagree, but I pledge my allegiance to this other camp. And the idea being that the ultimate judge of rightness or wrongness is experience. Now, experience is the worst teacher because circumstances change, and experience, and by the way, experience itself shows you that experience is a bad teacher, because your future experience will show that conclusions that you made from past experience were wrong. So empiricism is not like empirical knowledge, experience, right? It's not the best guide, but I think it's worth taking seriously. Surprisingly, there's a million other things I want to talk about. Anyway, so so I don't know. We don't have all the time, and I don't necessarily want to begin a new topic. But let me just maybe go back to this picture. So we have this question going from pronouns to precedents, and this picture assumes several things. First of all, notice, this picture assumes something that you can call unity of science. So, unity of science. That sciences have this, if you want, logical relationship between themselves. And in fact, chemistry is nothing else but simply an applied, heuristic, oversimplified physics. That if you could give the physical account, that would be the best account. But chemistry is a way to oversimplify, to zoom out a little bit, losing detail but still retaining some ability to predict. Also, so unity of science. Another assumption behind this picture is, if you want, is naturalism. And when I say naturalism, I suppose in the most straightforward sense, I mean naturalism as contrasted with supernaturalism. So supernatural is this idea that somehow the world cannot be explained within its own limits, within its own terms, but you need to introduce miracles into the story. Well, on this account, well, another question we'll deal with at some other time. Can appeal to miracles ever be an explanation? Because it seems that if you appeal to miracles, you have given up on explanations. If you say, I know why this thing happened, I know why Donald Trump was elected, I can give you a scientific reason. The reason is it was a miracle. That doesn't sound, linguistically speaking, like a reason. It sounds more like, fuck off, I don't want to talk to you. It's a miracle, it doesn't seem to be the kind of, complex, verifiable procedure. Anyway, so another thing that this picture assumes is mechanism. So this is a mechanistic picture of the universe, which is contrasted with teleological picture of the universe. So teleological comes from the Greek word telos, which means aim or purpose or goal. And I can explain this in very simple terms. So this means aim or purpose or goal. It seems that philosophers, since ancient times, had this notion, not all, but the most prominent philosophers had this idea that the world is somehow our home, that we are at home in the world, that everything happens for a deep reason, for a good reason, for a moral reason. So if you have a pimple in your forehead or a splinter in your toe, this is because, let's say, God willed it directly. Now, teleological picture doesn't have to presuppose God, but often it does. Some notion of divinity. So everything has a reason, everything has a meaning. If something tragic happens to you, if you lose a limb, or if your loved one dies, this has a deep moral reason, a justification as to why this had to happen. And why this is, for example, for the best in this best of all possible world. This is the old theological worldview. It goes out the window. Starting, especially with the scientific revolution, with people like Galileo, Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, and Darwin is going to play a very important role in bringing about this picture. So, on the mechanistic version of the story, it could be possible to predict what's going to happen. So there is a cause, but not a reason, not a meaningful or a moral reason as to why this had to happen. Not had to happen, but why this is meaningful, so to speak, right? So the teleological universe is a universe which is, again, deeply attuned to us. Everything that happens for a good moral reason, and it makes sense. In the mechanistic universe, nothing happens for any good reason. There are causes, but not reasons, and certainly not moral justifications. And this world, in a deep sense, is chaotic. Immanuel Kant has put it best. Says, describing this worldview, the mechanistic worldview, as der Schlund des zwecklosen Chaos der Materie, the abyss of the purposeless chaos of matter. The abyss of the purposeless chaos of matter. Very important starting point for our course, because this, part of my task is to show to you that even though we do not have the final answers, probably this is the best picture, even though it cannot be proven 100%, but still, it seems that our intellectual effort is best spent not trying to argue against mechanistic worldview, but in trying to make sense of it. And here, again, in a deep sense, going from protons to presidents, from electrons to elections, what am I? What meaning does my life have? What meaning can my life have in a universe which, at bottom, is the abyss of the purposeless chaos of man? But that's the assumption. And I suppose, so let's say, talk about unity of science, naturalism, mechanicism, and picture number 4, idea number 4, is that the way you get from protons to presidents, there's actually a one-word answer. And the one-word answer, and this is a good candidate for the most important intellectual idea ever in the history of humanity, somebody to order itself. And this answer is evolution. That, broadly speaking, the increase in complexity, the primary mechanism which is responsible for the increase in complexity is, you could say, various forms of natural selection, but most importantly, because most of the complexity has to do with biological life, the answer to this is evolution. And again, so I talk about this mechanistic versus theological worldview. But you gotta understand, again, ancient philosophers thought this world, not all of them, not all of them. You had mechanicists among ancient philosophers, like Democritus, for example. And you actually had proponents of theory of evolution among ancient philosophers. Like Empedocles, let's say. But again, like Aristotle, for example. Aristotle says, this world is far too orderly to have come about simply by chance. So there must be something like divine providence at the root of this world. This is what Aristotle says. And again, this is a deeply comfortable picture. There's a problem with wishful thinking. We want this picture to be true. Because on this picture, this world is truly our home. But the problem is, you have people, again, like Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, and especially Newton. And Newton says, no. The order, you do not need to invoke divinity. I can just give you formulas. I can give you mathematical formulas with simple assumptions. Now, Newton's formula was simple. F is equal to m1 multiplied by m2 divided by r squared multiplied by constant g, right? It's a simple formula. In 2020, our formula is slightly more complicated. This is the Lagrangian of the standard model of particle physics. This is our best fundamental description of reality. Applying the principle of least action to the evolution of quantum fields. Anyway, so our formula has become slightly more complicated, but the idea is the same. And first, for the motions of the planets, you could explain the orderly motions of the planets without invoking God. But then people like Kant said, okay, Newton takes away some of our aims or purposes, but Kant says, there will never be a Newton for a blade of grass. So Kant says, you will never have a mechanistic explanation of life. So again, this is why I'm talking about Darwin. Of course, Darwin comes on the scene, and it's not like Darwin is the most important philosopher. No. But his idea is crucial. The idea is much bigger than the man. Darwinian thinking, evolutionary thinking, becomes crucial. And again, Daniel Dennett, philosopher, says that this is evolution, so to speak, evolutionary conception, is the most important idea in all of the sciences, period. And ideas, we'll devote a whole class, in fact, more, to evolution. The idea how purely by mechanistic causes, through this blind, random determinism, you can evolve complexity mechanistically. Without, so like the old picture, the Aristotelian picture, would be that there's a god or gods who pull us up into this area of complexity. And on this new picture, you don't have to talk about gods. Gods don't do any work. I can give you a mathematical formulation that will tell you why this naturally evolves. Not supernaturally, but naturally evolves towards complexity, which again is a deeply disconcerting thought. Because if this picture is right, you are nothing but a collection of fluctuations in the quantum field. And all these sorts of things, like all your dreams and memories, all your hopes, all your fears, broken heart, etc., etc. All of this is just electrochemistry of your brain. Mundane stuff. And notice, so again, also deeply disconcerting fact, because if this theory is right, as Thomas Hobbes says, who is one of the strongest of this mechanistic worldview, whatsoever is the object of any man's appetite or desire is that which he calls good. And the object of his hate and aversion is what he calls evil. There being nothing simply and absolutely so. So Hobbes says, if this picture is right, okay, one person plants flowers, another person eats children. Both obey this formula. And like objectively speaking, from the standpoint of the universe, it doesn't matter. We, tiny humans, from our limited subjective perspective, we make distinctions based on our preferences, and Hobbes doesn't know about this, but contemporary Hobbesians will say, yeah, but what are your preferences? Your preferences are simply the result of a contingent evolution, contingent evolutionary question. Contingent meaning not necessary, right? And again, it's like Kurzgesagt, you probably know this chat, some of you probably know this chat. They have this running joke about giving people depression. I'm not trying to give people depression, although I have to warn you that depression is an occupational hazard in the sport. But I'll try. I'll try to propose some more optimistic ways of looking at all this. So, Yeah. So I suppose the last question, so A, B, C, D, E, let's have E. The last question is the question of meaning. So this picture has a lot of stuff, but one thing it doesn't really have is a good answer to the question of what is the meaning of life. And that's kind of a problem. So these are, in some sense, assumptions. This is not an assumption, this is a question. It's an important question. We'll try to tackle in all sorts of ways. Okay, I have 1 minute. So there's an important thing I have to say in this 1 minute. Although in general, I'll probably try to slow down next time. But, pause your collection, let me ask questions. By the way, this is for future time. Again, if you find something which I'm saying unclear, don't hesitate to interrupt me. Just raise your hand. Yeah. So, kind of distasteful to talk about syllabus in the last week. Who cares about syllabus? We're talking about the meaning of the universe, and you're talking about syllabus. But I have to talk about the syllabus. So, this course, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. But I do not want to make the choice for you all the way. So 40% of your grade, 40% of your grade is going to be 3 presentations. So first presentation, second presentation, third presentation, 10% each. And then you choose one presentation and you write an essay. Why am I saying this? Because some of you are going to be interested in P versus NP. Some of you are going to be interested in Martin Heidegger. Or some people who want to know Emil Durkheim, or I don't know, or Sean Carroll. Right? So I want to give you an opportunity to tailor the course to your interests. So if you're interested in philosophy of physics, you can do all 3 presentations on philosophy of physics. Okay, so three presentations plus one of the presentations you write an essay about. Basically there are 3 basic, I don't want to say textbooks, there are 3 basic books which I recommend to you as ideas for presentations. So one is a book by Sean Carroll, The Big Picture. And this is basically going to be this naturalistic picture of the universe, from pronouns to presence. So if this stuff, from pronouns to presence, if that's what interests you, then look at Carroll's book. So Carroll, 2016. If you're interested in Karl Popper, Feyerabend, Kuhn, etc., the epistemological stuff, or maybe you're interested in problem of induction, or you want to write about David Hume's epistemology, then the best book is the book by Martin Hollis. I actually forget the date, but they're all already applauded. And the third book, if you're not interested in either, so let's say this is physicalism or naturalism. This is epistemology. Epistemology means theory of knowledge, important to know. But if you're not interested in this, and if you're interested in social theory, and we'll have a whole, I probably should talk about this more, but we're going to talk about Kant and Hegel, we're going to talk about Marx, and Emil Durkheim and Max Weber. So if you're interested in social theory, the best book for you is going to be a book by Alex Kalinikas on social theory. And the reason I give these 3 books is because, again, like, the presentations are going to be not like last year. The presentations are not tied to class. I forgot to turn on the recording. The presentations are not tied to class reading. In the presentation, I want you to go beyond the course. So basically, like, the takeaway point, one takeaway point from this lecture is think about what interests you. And obviously, you don't have to decide on all 3 topics, but this is going to be a huge chunk of the course. And I'm offering you, again, a chance, a choice to tailor the course to your own requirements and needs. Okay, with that said, I deeply apologize for for stealing 2 minutes of your time. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope this was fun. And I'll see you in the seminars.